Zena's voice was barely audible above the buzzing of the crowd as she carried a tray of champagne glasses to the private dining area. The high-end restaurant was full of businessmen, city elites, and tourists, but all eyes were on the scene unfolding before them. 14 police dogs, trained to detect even the slightest hint of danger, were circling a small child in the center of the room. The dogs growled, their teeth bared, as the little girl stood frozen, her backpack hanging loosely from her shoulders. "She's just a kid," Elena shouted desperately, her voice cracking with emotion. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence, as the patrons, once engrossed in their conversations, now watched in stunned disbelief. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Elena Brooks, a waitress at the restaurant, had been working double shifts for weeks to provide a better life for her daughter, Maya. Maya, just 7 years old, was an innocent bystander in this nightmare. She didn't understand why the dogs were barking at her. Her eyes, wide with fear, stayed locked on the officers. Maya had never been in this kind of situation before. She was used to playing with her dolls, eating lunch at school, or going to the park with her mom. This, however, was different. This was terrifying. Elena, dressed in her red uniform, pushed her way forward, desperate to protect her daughter. She stood between Maya and the K-9 unit, her heart pounding in her chest. "Please, she's just a kid," Elena repeated, her voice now louder, pleading with the officers. The room seemed to hold its breath. Maya, despite the chaos, remained calm. She stood tall, not letting the fear in her heart show. She clutched her toy robot tightly, her tiny hands trembling slightly as she faced the dogs. It wasn't the first time something had tried to break her, but this time, she wasn't going to run. Elena reached out, her hands trembling as she gently pushed the dogs back. She knew this wasn't just any ordinary situation. Maya wasn't just any child. Elena had raised her to be brave, to stand up against injustice. But in that moment, with the eyes of the world upon them, Elena realized that this battle was bigger than her. She wasn't just fighting for Maya's safety. She was fighting to show the world that a mother's love could overcome any obstacle, no matter how big or small. The air around them seemed to freeze as the officers, too, hesitated. The K-9s, normally aggressive in the face of a threat, began to calm, their growls dying down as they looked to their handlers for direction. Elena held her breath, waiting for what would come next. Would the officers understand? Would they back off? Or would they escalate things further? Maya looked up at her mom, a quiet strength in her eyes. This wasn't just about the dogs or the officers anymore. It was about standing your ground when the world told you to kneel. And Maya, though she was just a kid, wasn't going to kneel. Zena stood frozen for a brief moment, staring at the scene unfolding in front of her. She had been working at the Blue Haven restaurant for over a year, serving guests who rarely took the time to look at her as anything more than just a waitress. But this was different. The room, which had been filled with soft murmurs and the clinking of fine china just moments ago, was now quiet, tense, as the K-9 unit circled the young girl in the middle of the floor. Elena stood in front of Maya, trying to block the dogs, her voice pleading. "She's just a kid," she repeated, hoping someone, anyone, would listen. The officers who had initially been calm were now on edge. The man in charge, Sergeant Richards, stood several feet away, observing the situation, his eyes narrowed. He wasn't sure what to do. On one hand, there was the training, the protocol to follow, and on the other, there was the undeniable fact that a small child was caught in the middle of this chaos. Richards was known for his strict adherence to procedure, but there was something about this moment that made him hesitate. As Maya stood still, she glanced up at her mother, their eyes meeting, a silent understanding between them. Elena had taught her that sometimes silence and patience spoke louder than any words. Maya took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of courage she had. "It's okay, Mommy," she said softly, her voice steady for a child of her age. Elena froze for a moment, unsure of how to react. She had never expected her daughter to respond like that, to take the situation into her own hands. Maya reached up and touched the closest K-9 dog's ear, her small fingers brushing against the fur gently. The dog, a large German shepherd, flinched but did not bark or snap. Instead, it sat down, its attention shifting from aggressive instinct to something softer. The rest of the dogs followed suit, one by one, their aggressive posture softening as they calmed, no longer circling but instead sitting down and looking toward their handlers. Sergeant Richards, who had been watching the entire exchange, took a step forward. He had been trained to handle these situations, to remain authoritative and in control, but this was unlike anything he had ever seen. The room was still silent, with all eyes on the girl and the dogs. Richard's gaze flicked from Maya to Elena, and then to the other officers who stood, equally stunned. Elena's hands were still trembling, but she didn't take her eyes off Maya. Maya's calmness was powerful, and in that instant, it shifted the energy in the room. She did it, Richards muttered under his breath, more to himself than anyone else. The words "just a kid" echoed in his mind. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Maya was supposed to be frightened. She was supposed to cry, to flee, or to panic. But instead, she stood there, composed, showing a quiet strength that none of the adults in the room could have predicted. Maya took a small step back, keeping her eyes on the dogs, then looked up at her mother. The tension in the room started to lift, but the atmosphere was still heavy. Sergeant Richards gave a subtle nod to his officers, signaling them to step back. He was acknowledging the unspoken shift in control, the shift that had happened not because of the officers, but because of Maya. Elena took a deep breath, her shoulders relaxing slightly. "Thank you," she whispered to Maya, her voice full of gratitude and disbelief. The officers, who had once been on high alert, now stood in a much more relaxed posture, their focus shifting from the threat they had perceived to the girl who had somehow diffused it. But Elena couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed in that room, something that couldn't be explained by mere protocol or obedience. Maya had shown them all something. Sometimes, power didn't come from control. Sometimes, it came from understanding and calm. The room was still for a moment longer, and then, as if by cue, the noise of the restaurant slowly crept back in. The sounds of silverware, hushed conversations, and the clink of glasses resumed, but now with an undercurrent of something else, respect, even awe. The scene in the restaurant, which had been filled with tension just moments before, had turned into a moment of quiet reverence. Maya, the little girl who had stood still in the face of a dangerous situation, had done what no one else could. She had calmed the storm. She had reminded everyone in that room that sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is simply stay calm and be present. As the tension in the restaurant began to dissolve, a wave of murmurs spread through the crowd. The officers, still unsure how to process the situation, glanced at one another, unsure if they should continue with their original mission. Sergeant Richards, still trying to regain control, stepped forward, his expression serious. He looked down at Maya, who had not once broken her gaze from the dogs, her small hands still clutching her toy robot. "I apologize, young lady," Richard said, his voice low but sincere. The words seemed to surprise everyone in the room, even himself. He had been trained to never apologize, especially not in front of a crowd, especially not to someone who had not yet even reached double digits in age. But there was something in the way Maya stood there, calm and collected, that made him second-guess everything he had been taught. The room, still holding its collective breath, waited. Maya didn't respond immediately. She simply looked up at him with those deep brown eyes, her expression unwavering. "It's okay," she finally said, her voice gentle, yet firm. Her words weren't just for Richards. They were for everyone in the room, as if to remind them that in moments like these, kindness and patience held more power than aggression and force. The officers, who had been standing stiffly, began to relax, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. Richards, realizing the moment was bigger than just him, motioned for his team to step back. The K9s, once aggressive and restless, were now seated quietly, their focus trained on their handlers. The guests at the restaurant, who had been so quick to judge, now exchanged glances with a new understanding in their eyes. It was as if Maya had not only calmed the dogs but also the entire room, including the officers. Elena, who had been standing protectively in front of her daughter, now moved closer to Maya, her heart swelling with pride. She could feel the weight of the moment settle on her shoulders. This was her daughter, the same little girl who had been dismissed time and time again because of her race, her age, and her status in society. And yet, here she was, standing taller than anyone in that room. "Thank you, Maya," Elena whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Maya simply nodded, her small face breaking into a smile. For a moment, everything seemed to pause. The sound of silverware clinking, the chatter of the guests, the hum of the air conditioning. It all faded into the background as everyone in the room took a deep breath. Maya had done more than just calm a group of police dogs. She had turned the tables on the entire situation. In that instant, she had shown everyone in the room what true power looked like. Not the power that came from force or control, but the power of grace, of quiet strength, of standing your ground when the world expects you to crumble. As the officers began to walk back toward the door, Richards turned once more to Maya. "I'll make sure to inform the department about this," he said, his voice more respectful than before. "You've got a gift." Maya didn't say anything, but her eyes twinkled with the quiet wisdom of someone who knew that sometimes the best response to authority was simply to be yourself. As the door closed behind the officers, the restaurant began to return to its usual rhythm, but the atmosphere had changed. The guests who had once looked down on Elena and Maya now saw them in a different light. Maya had done what no one else could do. She had earned their respect, not through fear or force, but through her unwavering presence. Elena looked down at her daughter, her pride swelling in her chest. Maya had not just saved herself, she had saved her mother, too. She had shown them all that sometimes being strong doesn't mean standing up against something. It means standing tall and calm, no matter what life throws your way. As the restaurant began to return to a semblance of normalcy, the tension that had gripped the air seemed to dissipate slowly. The K-9 unit, once on high alert, was now quietly leaving, their handlers leading them calmly out the door. Maya, still standing in the center of the room, was the picture of calmness, but Elena could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. Maya had just done something incredible. She had turned the chaos into calm, and in doing so, had shown the world, including her mother, that strength was not about volume or power, but about presence. Elena knelt down, pulling her daughter into a tight hug. "Maya, you're amazing," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Maya smiled up at her, but she didn't say anything. She was used to her mother's words of encouragement, but today, there was something different in Elena's voice. Today, Maya had made a mark in a way no one could ignore. As the two of them stood there, in the now quiet restaurant, Elena's mind began to race. She thought about the years of struggle, the days she spent working 2 jobs just to make ends meet, the times she had to hold her head high despite the whispers and glances. But none of that mattered in the face of what Maya had just done. Maya had stood firm, unshaken, in a moment of crisis, and had changed the course of events. And now, as they stood in the aftermath of that chaos, Elena realized just how far they had come. Elena's gaze turned to Sergeant Richards, who was now standing at the entrance of the restaurant, talking to his officers. His expression was no longer one of authority, but of respect. He had seen something in Maya that no one, not even he, had expected. As Richards made his way back toward them, Elena could feel the shift in the air. He wasn't just a police officer now. He was a man who had witnessed something extraordinary. "I'll make sure this is reported," Richards said, his voice steady but softer than before. "What your daughter did, it was incredible." Elena smiled, but the smile didn't quite reach her eyes. She nodded, her heart still racing from the adrenaline of the moment. "Thank you," she said, though the words felt inadequate. Richards looked down at Maya, who was now clutching her robot again, her small fingers gently tracing the toy's edges. "She has a gift," he added, more to himself than to Elena. Maya, who had been quietly observing the exchange, looked up at him. "It's not a gift," she said softly, her voice calm, but carrying a wisdom beyond her years. "It's just how things should be. People should listen." The simplicity of her words hung in the air, and for a moment, Richards didn't know how to respond. He had come into the restaurant with a mission, with a clear objective, but what he had witnessed was something that didn't fit neatly into any protocol. It didn't fit into the world of rules and regulations he had spent years mastering. It wasn't about control or authority. It was about understanding, about seeing someone for who they truly were, beyond the uniforms, beyond the titles. Maya's quiet strength had stripped away the walls he had built around himself. "I will," Richard said finally, his voice filled with a newfound respect. "I'll make sure your daughter's actions are recognized." Elena looked at Maya, her heart swelling with pride. Maya had shown them all the power of silence, the power of standing firm when the world expects you to bend. And in doing so, she had changed the way everyone in that room saw her. Not as just a little girl, but as someone who had the ability to change the world. As the officers left and the last of the guests finished their meals, Elena and Maya stood there, in the center of the room, holding on to each other as if they had just come through something much bigger than themselves. The world outside might not have seen it yet, but in that moment, Maya had become something extraordinary. And Elena knew, in her heart, that the ripple effect of that moment would spread far beyond the walls of the Blue Haven restaurant. They had made a mark that would not be easily erased. As the evening wore on and the last of the police officers left the restaurant, Elena stood there, still processing everything that had happened. The room was quiet now, with only the sound of clinking silverware and the soft hum of the air conditioning filling the space. But beneath the surface, there was a palpable shift in the atmosphere. The guests who had witnessed the scene, some with their phones still recording, were now whispering among themselves, their eyes flicking nervously toward Elena and Maya. It was as if they were unsure how to act, unsure whether to apologize or to look away, as if acknowledging what had just transpired would make it real. Elena could feel the weight of their gazes, but she kept her chin high, her pride in Maya growing with every passing second. Maya had done something unimaginable. She had not only calmed the dogs, but she had made the entire room pause and reconsider their judgments. Maya had turned an overwhelming moment of tension into a quiet lesson in strength, and Elena couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude for the courage her daughter had shown. As the last table cleared, Elena took a deep breath, knowing it wasn't just the K9s that had been calmed tonight. The entire room had been changed. Richards, the police sergeant, had come over again before leaving. "I'll be honest," he said, his voice quieter than before. "I didn't expect that. I've been on the force for over 15 years, and I've seen a lot. But what your daughter did tonight," he shook his head, as if still in disbelief. "It's rare. Most people would have panicked, but she handled it like she'd done it 1,000 times before." Elena looked at him, her lips slightly curled in a small but sincere smile. "She's been through a lot," she said, her voice soft but filled with pride. "She's stronger than she looks." Richards nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Well, I'll tell you this. I won't forget what I saw tonight. I'm sure your daughter will do amazing things. And I'll make sure the department knows what happened here." He paused, his gaze flickering to Maya, who was now sitting at a table with her toy robot in front of her, quietly playing. "I'm not sure the world is ready for a kid like her," he added, almost to himself. "But they better get ready." Elena didn't reply. She didn't need to. Richards had seen it too, the quiet power Maya had, the strength that no one expected from a little girl. As he turned to leave, Elena walked over to Maya, her heart swelling with emotion. Maya looked up at her mother, her eyes wide and innocent, the same way they had been moments ago before the chaos had started. But there was something different in those eyes now. It was as if she had seen the world differently, as if she had learned something that no one else had. Elena knelt down beside her, brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "Maya," she said softly, "you were amazing tonight. I'm so proud of you." Maya smiled, a little shy but with a warmth that made Elena's heart ache. "I just didn't want them to be scared," she said simply. "I didn't want them to hurt anybody." Elena hugged her tightly, holding her close, as the weight of the evening's events finally began to settle. The restaurant was quiet now, but the ripple effect of what had just happened would be felt far beyond these walls. Elena knew that, no matter where life took them next, this moment would be the one they would remember. Maya had shown them all something they could never forget: the power of calm, the power of standing firm when the world expects you to fall. As they left the restaurant later that evening, Elena could feel the shift in the world around them. The air felt different, lighter, as if the universe itself had just given them a quiet nod of approval. Elena held Maya's hand tightly as they walked into the night, knowing that their journey, no matter how difficult, would always be marked by this moment. This quiet, powerful moment when Maya had changed everything. The next morning, the world outside seemed unchanged, yet everything had shifted. Elena sat at the kitchen table, the soft hum of the coffee maker filling the otherwise quiet apartment. Maya, still in her pajamas, sat across from her, playing with her toy robot, the same one she had been clutching in the restaurant the night before. The events of the previous evening felt like a distant dream, yet Elena knew they had happened. They had left an impression that would linger in her mind forever. The phone rang, breaking the silence. Elena answered, her voice still a little groggy. Hello, Elena. It was Richards. Elena's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected to hear from him so soon. Yes, this is Elena, she replied, trying to steady her voice. I just wanted to let you know that we've been in touch with the department, Richards said. His tone serious but respectful. We're handling the situation. And I wanted to say, again, that your daughter, she's something special. Elena felt a lump form in her throat. Thank you, she whispered, knowing that the words didn't quite capture the gratitude she felt. I'm glad she did the right thing. Richards paused, as if weighing his next words carefully. Look, I'm not sure how much you know about the way things work around here, he said, his voice quiet. But this isn't just about a few dogs and some police officers. Your daughter, she made an impact. Elena's heart fluttered. What do you mean? She showed us something. Richards continued, his words measured. Something that we often forget. People don't need to be afraid. They don't need to be controlled. Maya stood there, unshaken, and made all of us pause. She reminded us of what we're supposed to be doing, what we're supposed to stand for. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. She hadn't realized how much she had needed to hear those words until now. Maya had always been her beacon of hope, but hearing it from someone else, from someone who had been a part of the system she had always felt alienated from, was something else entirely. She's my world, Elena said softly, almost to herself. I just want her to have a better life, to be seen for who she is, not what people expect her to be. And now she is, Richards replied. Trust me, people will see her differently from now on. Elena set the phone down, her mind reeling. The words echoed in her mind, growing louder with every passing second. She knew it wasn't just about Maya's bravery in that moment. It was about the ripple effect of what had happened. Maya had done something that night that had the potential to change lives. It wasn't just about one police officer or one restaurant. It was about showing the world that courage and compassion could be the strongest forces in the room, not weapons or control. She looked over at Maya, who had stopped playing with her robot and was now watching her mother closely, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. Elena smiled at her, her heart swelling with pride. Maya had already taught her so much, but now, Elena realized, it was time for the world to learn the same lessons. Later, that afternoon, Elena received a call from the restaurant. The manager, Robert, was on the other line, his voice filled with a mix of apology and awe. Elena, I just wanted to say, again, how sorry I am for what happened last night, he said, sounding genuinely regretful. We never should have let the situation get that far. But, you know, Maya, she did something that none of us could have expected. She saved us all, Elena replied, her voice soft but firm. She saved everyone. She did, Robert agreed. And we want to do something for her. We're not sure how, but we want to make things right. Elena felt a smile tug at her lips. You already have, she said quietly. You've seen her for who she really is. That's all I could ask for. As she ended the call, Elena realized that Maya's actions had already begun to make a difference. They had begun to change the way people saw them, and in turn, the way the world saw Maya. And that was just the beginning. That night, as Elena tucked Maya into bed, she kissed her daughter's forehead. You're going to change the world, you know that? She whispered. Maya smiled sleepily, already half asleep. I just want to help, she murmured, her small hand clutching the robot tightly. Elena sat there for a moment, watching her daughter drift into a peaceful sleep. She knew this was just the beginning of their journey, and that, somehow, Maya was destined to do great things. Elena couldn't wait to see what came next, but for now, she was content to let the world wait. Because in that moment, Maya had already given them more than they could have ever asked for. The days following the incident at the restaurant were surreal. Elena and Maya went about their routines, but everything felt different. People on the street seemed to look at them with a new respect, and even in the grocery store, Elena noticed people giving her and Maya knowing nods. The incident with the police dogs had sparked something in the community, something that neither of them had expected. Elena had never been one to seek attention, but she had never been one to hide from the truth either. The truth was, Maya had done something remarkable. She had stood firm in the face of danger and uncertainty, and in doing so, had shown the world what real strength looked like. One afternoon, Elena sat down to check her email, a habit she had neglected over the past few days, consumed by everything that had happened. She found an email from Richards, the police sergeant who had witnessed it all. The subject line read, "A message of gratitude and support." Elena clicked it open, her fingers hovering over the keyboard, unsure of what to expect. The email was brief but heartfelt. "Elena, I just wanted to reach out and let you know that Maya's actions didn't just change the course of the night. They've changed the way we think about our work. Her bravery and composure have had a lasting impact on all of us. Please tell her that we are grateful for what she did, and that we are proud to have witnessed it." The message ended with a simple line, "I hope you and your family are doing well." Elena sat back in her chair, feeling a lump form in her throat. It was one thing to hear those words from a friend or family member, but from someone like Richards, a man who had seen it all, who had been hardened by years of service in law enforcement. That meant something. It meant that Maya's actions had not only been seen, but understood. They had made a difference. The phone rang just as Elena was about to reply to the email. It was Robert, the restaurant manager. "Elena, I've been meaning to call. I just wanted to thank you and Maya, again, for how you both handled everything. We've had a lot of press inquiries, and people are really interested in what happened." Elena raised an eyebrow. "Press inquiries? About Maya?" Robert laughed lightly. "Yes, actually. We've had a few people from local news stations wanting to interview her. It's been a bit overwhelming, to be honest." Elena chuckled softly, a little taken aback by the idea of Maya being interviewed. "She's just a little girl, Robert. She didn't do this for attention." "I understand completely," Robert said quickly. "And we're not pushing anything on her. But I think it's important for people to see the kind of strength she has. I wanted to ask you, if it's okay with you, if Maya would be willing to share her story." Elena thought for a moment. She didn't want to push Maya into anything, but she also knew that this was a moment that could inspire others. "I'll ask her," she said finally. "But we'll take it slow. This isn't about fame or attention. It's about Maya's strength." "Of course, absolutely," Robert agreed. "Just let us know. And again, thank you for everything. You and Maya are truly special." That night, Elena sat down with Maya to discuss the possibility of an interview. "Maya," she began gently, "a lot of people have heard about what happened at the restaurant, and some of them want to know your side of the story. They want to hear what you did, why you were so brave." Maya looked up from her toy, her eyes thoughtful. "Do I have to talk to them?" she asked quietly. Elena smiled, reaching out to squeeze her hand. "No, sweetheart, you don't have to do anything you don't want to do. But if you choose to, it could help others understand that bravery doesn't always look the way we think it does. Sometimes, it's about staying calm and doing the right thing, even when you're scared." Maya thought for a moment, then nodded. "I'll talk to them, Mom. But only if they promise not to make it too big. I don't like being the center of attention." Elena's heart swelled with pride. Maya was, without a doubt, a force to be reckoned with. "I promise, honey. It'll be about you telling your story, not about anyone else. You can do it in your own way." The next week, a local news station came to interview Maya. The camera crew was respectful, giving Maya space to tell her story at her own pace. The reporter, a woman named Jessica, spoke to her gently, asking about the night with the dogs. Maya, in her quiet way, spoke about how she didn't want anyone to be afraid and how she had just done what felt right. The interview was short, but impactful. Maya's calmness and maturity shone through, and the clip quickly went viral. People were inspired by her words, by the simple yet profound message she shared, that kindness, patience, and calmness could be powerful tools in any situation. By the end of the week, Elena noticed something different in the way people looked at them. They weren't just seeing Maya as a little girl anymore, they were seeing her as someone who had the power to inspire change, to make people think differently. The ripple effect of her actions was just beginning, and Elena knew that, in time, it would spread even further. The impact of Maya's actions spread like wildfire in the community, but it wasn't until a week later that Elena fully understood just how far the ripple effect had reached. Maya's interview had gone viral, and the clip was now being shared across social media platforms, garnering comments from people all over the world. At first, Elena had hesitated to allow Maya to share her story, unsure of how much attention it would draw. But as the support poured in, she began to see the significance of it all. One afternoon, Elena was at the grocery store when an older woman approached her. The woman smiled warmly and gently placed a hand on Elena's shoulder. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said softly. Elena blinked in surprise. "Thank you for raising a child like Maya," the woman continued. "She reminded me of what we've lost in society: respect, kindness, the ability to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. She's a hero." Elena felt the weight of the woman's words settle over her, and for the first time, she realized that Maya had become something more than just her daughter. Maya had become a symbol of hope for many. "Thank you," Elena said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm so proud of her." The woman smiled again before walking away, leaving Elena standing in the middle of the aisle, overwhelmed by the unexpected kindness of a stranger. That evening, after dinner, Elena and Maya sat together on the couch. Elena turned to her daughter, her eyes soft with affection. "Maya, people are saying some amazing things about you. They're proud of you. I'm so proud of you." Maya looked up from her book, her face lighting up with a small, shy smile. "Really? But I just did what felt right." Elena chuckled, her heart swelling with pride. "Exactly. And that's what makes you so special. You did what was right, and in doing so, you've shown the world that kindness, calmness, and strength don't always look the way people expect them to." Maya shrugged, a modest gesture. "I just don't like when people get hurt. It's better when everyone can just get along." Elena hugged her tightly, feeling the weight of the past few weeks lift from her shoulders. She realized that Maya had taught her something, too. In the midst of the chaos, Maya had found peace, and in her own quiet way, she had brought that peace to everyone around her. The next day, Maya was invited to speak at a local school. The invitation came from a teacher who had seen her interview and was inspired by her message. Elena hesitated at first, concerned about how much attention this would bring, but Maya was insistent. "Mom, I want to do this. I want to show them that being kind is the best way to be strong." Elena smiled, her heart full. "All right, honey. If you wanna, we'll make it happen." The day of the speaking event, Elena walked into the school with Maya, feeling a mix of pride and nervousness. They were greeted by a group of students and teachers who had gathered to hear Maya speak. As Maya stepped onto the small stage, Elena watched as her daughter took a deep breath, just like she had in the restaurant all those days ago, and spoke from the heart. "I know a lot of you probably think I'm just a little kid," Maya began, her voice steady and confident. "But I want to tell you that being kind is stronger than anything else. You don't need to be loud or bossy to be powerful. You just need to do what's right." Elena watched, amazed. Maya was speaking with the same quiet strength she had shown in the restaurant, and the students in the audience were hanging on every word. By the time Maya finished speaking, the room was silent, and then a wave of applause filled the air. Elena felt a tear slip down her cheek as she realized how much her daughter had grown, how much she had changed the world around her with her simple, yet profound, message. Maya had not only become a role model for those around her, she had become the kind of person the world needed more of. A person who knew that true strength came from within, and that no matter how young or small you might be, you could make a difference. As the months passed, the world began to see Maya not just as a little girl, but as a symbol of quiet strength and bravery. Her story spread across the community, reaching people from all walks of life. Maya's calm presence had not only saved a situation in a restaurant, it had sparked a movement. People began sharing her message, that strength didn't come from loudness or force, but from kindness, patience, and standing firm in the face of adversity. Elena watched her daughter grow, more confident and more aware of the impact she had on those around her. Maya continued to speak at schools, in communities, and even in local media outlets, always sharing the same simple message: kindness is powerful. One day, as Elena sat with Maya, watching her daughter play with her toy robot, she realized something profound. It wasn't just the world that had changed. They had changed too. Elena had learned to embrace the quiet strength that Maya had always carried. She had learned that sometimes the best way to face life's challenges was not to fight against them, but to meet them with grace and patience. And Maya, with her courage and compassion, had shown her that being true to yourself was the most powerful thing you could do. "You've changed everything, Maya," Elena whispered, her voice full of pride. Maya smiled up at her, her eyes bright with innocence and wisdom beyond her years. I just did what felt right, Mom. Elena hugged her tightly, knowing that Maya's journey was just beginning. They had made a difference, and together, they would continue to change the world, one act of kindness at a time.